This tutorial looks at how do search engines work. Now, we've covered a good bit of this over the last 2 or 3 tutorials. So we're going to start off with a quick recap.
Let's ask a simple question. How long does it take to travel to Mars? Where did these results come from? And why was this listed before the other one?
Okay, let's dive in and see how the search engine turned your request into a result. The first thing you need to know is that when you do a search, the search engine isn't actually going out to the World Wide Web to run your search in real time. And that's because there's over 1 billion websites on the internet and hundreds more are being created every single minute. So if the search engine had to look through every single site to find the one you wanted, it would just take forever. So to make your search faster, search engines are constantly scanning the web in advance to record the information that might help with your search later. That way, when you search about travel to Mars, the search engine already has what it needs to give you an answer in real time.
Here's how it works. The internet is a web of pages connected to each other by hyperlinks. Search engines are constantly running a program called a spider that crawls through these web pages to collect information about them. Each time it finds a hyperlink, it follows it until it has visited every page it can find on the entire internet. For each page the spider visits, it records any information it might need for a search by adding it to a special database called a search index.
Now, let's go back to that search from earlier and see if we can figure out how the search engine came up with the results. When you ask, how long does it take to travel to Mars, the search engine looks at each of those words in the search index to immediately get a list of all the pages on the internet containing those words. But just looking for these search terms could return millions of pages, so the search engine needs to be able to determine the best matches to show you first. This is where it gets tricky, because the search engine may need to guess what you're looking for.
Each search engine uses its own algorithm to rank the pages based on what it thinks you want. The search engine's ranking algorithm might check if your search term shows up in the page title. It might check if all of the words show up next to each other, or any number of other calculations that help it better determine which pages you'll want to see and which you won't.
Google invented the most famous algorithm for choosing the most relevant results for a search by taking into account how many other web pages link to a given page. The idea is that if lots of websites think that a web page is interesting, then it's probably the one you're looking for. This algorithm is called PageRank, not because it ranks web pages, but because it was named after its inventor, Larry Page, who's one of the founders of Google.
Because the website often makes money when you visit it, spammers are constantly trying to find ways to game the search algorithm so that their pages are listed higher in the results. Search engines regularly update their algorithms to prevent fake or untrustworthy sites from reaching the top. Ultimately, it's up to you to keep an eye out for these pages that are untrustworthy by looking at the web address and making sure it's a reliable source.
Search programs are always evolving to improve the algorithms so they return better results, faster results than their competitors. Today's search engines even use information that you haven't explicitly provided to help you narrow down your search. So for example, if you did a search for dog parks, many search engines would give you results for all the dog parks nearby, even though you didn't type in your location.
Okay, so we've learned a good bit there about how search engines work, to add to what we know already. One thing I just want to make sure that everybody understands is that it's not a live search. They've mentioned that already. We've mentioned it earlier on in one of the tutorials, that it's an index. So what that means is that the search engine sends out a spider. The spider crawls all the sites, records the specific data that they deem necessary, and brings it back to their search engine and back to their database. So that's already in the database. And then when we search for something, we're actually searching the database. Okay, so it's after conducting the search prior to our search. Okay, so what we're going to have a look at is, over the next little while, we'll have a look at crawling, indexing, and ranking. So these are the 3 different things that we're going to look at. Crawling is how does a search engine actually go around from site to site. Indexing is what information does it actually store. and record when they're on the site and bring back to the database. And then ranking is how do they rank what's most important and what's most appropriate for us to see when we type in keywords into a search engine. So we're going to start off with, first of all, with crawling. Okay. And the first word we're going to throw into the mix here is what's known as a deep crawl. Once upon a time, all search engines used to just go to the home page, and they used to use the home page as a barometer or a way of saying what was in the rest of the website. Now, that means that once upon a time, any website used to have to put all their information or all the what they deem necessary in the home page. Okay, and that wasn't the best way of telling what kind of information they had in the rest of the site. So, since the introduction of websites or search engines like Google, they introduced things like a deep crawl, which means that not only do they go to the homepage of the site, but they also follow all the links from the homepage to all the rest of the pages within the site. So they crawl the entire website rather than just the particular homepage of that site. So as you can see from something like this, they will crawl all the pages within the site, going around, gathering information and bringing it back to its database. Okay. Next one up is frames and iframes. Again, once upon a time, search engines and spiders didn't like frames or iframes. They couldn't follow them correctly. They couldn't work their way around them. But that is a thing of the past. And what we now have is, once upon a time, people used to say frames, oh, don't use them because the search engine can't get around them, whereas now they can. So what is a frame? Well, you can see up here, I have a website just on the screen here, and it shows that the top part up here with the actual title and the menu and the social links, that is a frame which is always visible on the screen. And then where it says latest news in the middle here, that's an iframe, which is an internal frame, okay, which has a scroll bar on that and you can scroll up and down there. But search engines can now look at these and they can understand them and they can read them and they can follow them and there's no problem with them anymore, okay? So it's the same with this page here. There's you can see that there's an internal frame in the middle of it, and in that particular internal frame we have a PDF. So with regards to the frames, there's no problem getting around them and reading them and understanding them and so on. Okay, so frames are not the hindrance that they once were. Okay, next one up is image maps. Now, for starters, what is an image map? And secondly, how do spiders deal with them? First of all, I'll just show you what an image map is very briefly here. An image map is an image which is broken down into several links. Okay, so this was one image we have here with Facebook, Google+, Twitter and Pinterest on it. But what it allows us to do is we've split it up, and if you click on the Facebook part, it will bring you to Facebook. If you click on the Google part, it'll bring you to Google+. If you click on the Twitter part, it'll bring you to Twitter, and you click on the Pinterest, it'll bring you to Pinterest. So it's actually an image split up into several links. We've seen this quite often. We use it ourselves in things like when we tag somebody in an image, so it only is connected to their part of the image and so on. This is called an image map. And here's another example of one here where there's different parts of the screen will allow different parts of the image will allow you to link to different parts. Okay, so we can see here what's going on. And here's another one. Now, search engines cannot follow the actual image map, the links coming from the image map. So quite often what we're told to do, and humans love image maps, search engines don't. Okay, so if you're going to use an image map, what you have to do is you have to display links below it like we have here, which is actually quite useful because, while we all might be aware of certain states in America and where they're located, we may not be familiar with a lot of them, especially the ones in around the middle. We get a little bit confused of what's what, okay? So it's no harm that we have them down along here. As well as that, these keywords appear on the page as well. So, from a number of different perspectives, the search engine likes the links down here. Humans like this type of scenario up here, okay? So we're not trying to say don't use image maps, but what we're trying to say is when you use image maps, make sure to use them appropriately and make sure to provide links like this down here on the bottom for the search engine to follow. Otherwise, they will find it very difficult to find certain pages on your site. Next one is robot.text. Now, what this means is you can see rel equals no follow. There's two options here, no follow and no index. Now, what this actually means is there are certain pages in our website that we may not want a search engine to index, okay? So we may not want other humans having access to. So we might have a section in our site which is, maybe behind a password protected area, okay? So quite often you see maybe on the bottom of a website, you'll see staff or you'll see admin and that kind of thing where only certain people, if you click on that link, you'll have to put in a password to be able to access that link, okay? So you don't want the information behind those closed doors to be accessible and to be found on something like Google, okay? So what you can do, there's two different methods of doing this. You can actually, you can have a robots.txt, which is a text file that you save into a folder. And what it actually says is it lists out the pages that you don't want the search engine to go into. Okay, so what it will do is it'll go into a folder. If it sees the robot.txt, it will actually say, right, don't look at these pages. Okay, now that sounds like a reasonable thing, but the problem is, if I was a hacker, the first thing I would look for is a robots.txt actual file, and in that I would be able to see what pages it didn't want me to be looking at. Okay, so it's kind of like a roadmap of where not to go on the website, which is, in the case of a hacker, might be exactly the place they want to go. So robot.txt works, but I would have a caveat around it saying that, it may not be the safest way of doing it. In fact, it isn't. And we'll talk about maybe a better way of doing that. Okay, so it tells them not to go into certain files or not to go into certain folders. Okay. Now, what's a better way of doing it? Well, a robots meta tag. So what this actually says on top here is robots, if you're a spider, content to this page means no index. In other words, don't look any further than here and put it into your database, and don't follow any links that are in here as well. So you see no index, no follow. Okay. And this is a better way around it. So you'd put that into all the pages that you don't want people having access to and you don't want search engines going into. So that's a better way of doing it. Okay. Paid inclusion. Now, what does this mean is that quite a few search engines once upon a time used to have paid inclusion. In other words, if you paid, you would get included on the search engine. Search engines like Google don't have things like this. So they don't have a section where you can pay to get included on it. And that's good because it shows their independence and allows us to make sure that the actual searches we have are the most appropriate for what we want. Okay. Next one is indexing. Indexing is literally what kind of information does the search engine look for when they're on your site. So what sort of information does the spider gather when they go around from page to page within your site? Okay. The first one is full text indexing. Okay. Does the search engine index capture every bit of every page? The answer is no, they don't. So what do they get and what don't they get? All right. For starters, we'll have a look at here the full body of text. Okay. All major search engines say that they index the full visible body text of a page. Okay, that means taking every single thing. Okay, Google generally doesn't index past the first 101k of a long HTML page. So you probably notice over the last maybe decade or so, pages are after getting shorter, which is good for ourselves, but also good for the search engine. Okay, it means that that we can scan a page. There's less scrolling involved in all of these pages. So it's a good thing. So with that, 101k sounds like an awful lot, but isn't a huge amount of text. So keep your pages short. Make sure that Google will search those pages. Okay. So how big is too big for Google? Well, as we said here, 101k. So you can see from the screenshot above that it only renders up to the 158 keyword. Okay, so when you keep that, keep it short, simple as that. Don't need to get too bogged down in this. Okay. Second thing is it doesn't take stop words. Now, what are stop words? Well, things like and of and in and on and an and it and things like that. So it excludes these from the words that it captures. So it takes the main words from your page, but doesn't include these link words or these stop words. So keep that in mind when you're constructing your pages as to what you're doing. Okay. Stemming words. Now, this is interesting because it does stem, and spiders are very good at stemming, and so are search engine at understanding what stemming is. So let's try and get this idea. What is stemming? Well, if I take the base word tour, all these words are stems of it. Tourist, tours, tourism, touristic, tourists, etc. Okay, so these are all stems. So what we can do, and it starts to relate these words to one another, is we can start using different things such as stems throughout this. So instead of me having to use the word tourist every time, I can use different variations of this. So it'll read like my text is more natural, but it'll also be more understanding from a human perspective and from an actual search engine perspective. The last one here is ranking. So how do they rank? Well, as we've mentioned in a previous tutorial, Google uses over 250 criteria for measuring and for deciding what's the most appropriate to your search and what's putting it number one in the search engine results page. So in these kind of things, it's very important for us to keep an eye on these things. Okay, so I'm just going to say time for a little exercise. Okay. What does a search engine look for? Okay, what we're going to look at over in this particular tutorial and in the next one, which looks at audits, is we're going to start looking at these different ranking criteria. Okay, but a lot of these things we know already. We know them from previous experience, but also over the last few tutorials I've been talking about these. So if you've actually done exercise 4 already, great. If you haven't, pause it here and actually have a go at exercise 4. It's a very, very simple exercise about, what does a search engine look for in a particular page? What's more important? How does it weight certain criteria? Does it weight them differently? Is everything the same or is everything weighted differently? A lot of things are weighted differently. So have a go at exercise 4. If you haven't already done it. If you have, great. Hang on and we'll go on and we'll talk about what's in exercise 4. If you haven't dealt with it, what I want you to do is very simply pause the video here and go and do it for 5 or 10 minutes or however long it takes, and then come back and restart and we'll discuss what you found. Okay, so I'm looking at the Irish Times here, and really all I want you to do is the exercise. This is the exercise 4. Is I want you to look at this and see what's important. What are the most important parts of this particular page? What does the search engine deem more important than other parts? Okay, are there certain things on the screen that are more important? And there are. Let's have a look at them. Okay, first of all, we'll have a look at these different things here. The first thing I want to focus on is the title. That's extremely important, okay? And that's what appears up here in the top of your tab there. And like the title of a book or like the title of a paper, of course, there should be certain things in there that will tell us what this book or what this paper is about. And it's the exact same with a web page. Search engines see and deem the title of your document more and weight them higher than normal text. So it's very important that we have a good, strong, keyword-rich title. Okay. The second thing we're going to have a look at are the headings. Okay. And again, the headings of our chapters or the headings of our sections, again, strong keyword. They are deemed more important than the rest of your text. Okay. So what else? Well, let's have a quick look here. The content of your page, of course. Is there anything more important in this content than other things? Yes, there are. Okay. And we'll talk about these things. So got location, location, location. What I'm going to say is, if you think something is important, start your content with a good, strong introduction and put it in strong, keyword rich. Okay, like you would in an article such as something in the Irish Times. The first, line or two or paragraph probably tells a lot of the story. Okay, so it's important to introduce strongly. Next one is density. Now, we said earlier on, or we saw in one of our previous exercises, that Google says that they don't really have, there's no such thing as real density. But to be quite honest, of course there is, right? So there may be no magic number when it comes to density, but density is, just say I have the word Ireland in here, or Irish in here, just say Ireland. How many times does the word Ireland appear, and if in the content? Okay, so just say I have 100 words and the word Ireland appears 3 times. Therefore, my density is 3%. We've talked about this before. Okay, if my density was 8%, you're starting to say, well, that's 1 every 12 words. I've got the word Ireland in 1 every 12 words. Is that considered natural text? It may not be, and it really has to come down to reading the actual text to see whether it fits in or not. If it looks like you're trying to force it and force your keywords into the text, well, then probably you are. Okay, so what they're saying is keep your text natural. And to be quite honest, if the word does not appear in my text, well, then Google will not see it as being important to your website. Okay, and so therefore it has to appear in there, and how often it appears in there is dependent on how natural the text will be. But if I was to throw a rule of thumb in there, I would say between 3 and 5% is where we're looking at. Okay, text must be natural. Just said that. Position on the page is very important. Okay, what that means is lists. In certain cases, when we look at a list, we look across the top, then the next line, then the next line. But actually, as it turns out, search engines look down along a column and then down the second one, then down a third one. So be careful if you're using tables where you're going to put your content on the page. Okay. Relevant introduction. I mentioned that already. It's important to have a good, strong introduction. And JavaScript. Remember that JavaScript, if we've too much JavaScript on our page, it actually pushes the content down lower in the HTML itself. Okay. Further on from this, we must remember that when we're dealing with keywords, we're not just dealing with one keyword. We're starting to deal with keyword phrases. And more we're finding that people are searching for 2, 3, and 4 words and 5 words and so on. So this is called long tail SEO, where you're actually using more than 2 and 3 and 4 words. In fact, very infrequently, we use just one word, as it turns out. So, unless we're looking for something extremely specific and we know exactly what we're looking for, more than likely we're using 2, 3, and 4 words. So keep this in mind. Anything else is important about this particular text in here? Well, I'm just going to highlight these things here. Okay, what are these? These are called anchor text. All right. Quite often, we must remember to put strong anchor text in there, because again, they are weighted more heavily than normal text. So how many times have we ever seen a little blue piece of text that says click here? Okay, that really doesn't tell us an awful amount about what's actually happening when we click here. So remember to put keywords into your anchor text. Use it properly and use it appropriately. As well as that, we mentioned in another tutorial earlier on, in fact in another exercise, that most search engines can't see images. So what do we do to combat that? Well, we use what's known as alt text. And that means we can actually tag our image with some text. And it's very important that we do that so that number one, that the search engine has an idea what's in behind this and what the image is of. And therefore, we might find our images appearing when people look for a picture search or an image search in Google and so on. But as well as that, it also helps us to build a density and to get other keywords into our pages. Okay, so use that appropriately.